Welcome to a deep dive into, well, one of the most shocking and frankly enduring true crime mysteries in American history. This really is a wild one. The 1970 Fort Bragg murders. We're talking about Colette MacDonald and her two young daughters, Kimberly, who was 5, and Kristen, just 2 years old.
Mm-hmm. And on the surface, the MacDonalds looked like that perfect all-American family. The father, Captain Jeffrey MacDonald, was a Princeton grad, a Green Beret surgeon. Seemed idyllic.
But like you said, seemed idyllic. There were hints, apparently, of tension just sort of bubbling beneath that facade. So what are we really trying to untangle today with this incredibly complex case?
Well, that perfect image, it just shattered. Early hours, February 17th, 1970. A faint call for help came in around 3:42 a.m. Military police arrive.
And the scene they found, horrific, doesn't even begin to cover it.
No. Colette, Kimberly, Kristen, all brutally murdered. Knife, ice pick, multiple weapons. And then there's this chilling detail, the word pig, scrawled in blood on the master bedroom headboard. MacDonald himself, he was found injured but alive.
Chilling is the right word. So our mission for this deep dive is really to unpack how this nightmare happened and maybe explore why this case, it's still so intensely debated legally and publicly, even after, 50 plus years?
Exactly. It just doesn't go away.
Okay, so MacDonald's story. He talked about a hippie invasion, right?
That was his account, yes. Woken by screams, finds 4 intruders, 3 men, and a woman wearing a floppy hat.
And they were chanting something.
Acid is groovy, kill the pigs. That's what he claimed they chanted. He said he fought them. His pajama top got torn in the living room, and then he was knocked out.
Kill the pigs. And the writing on the headboard.
Right. That immediately brought the recent Charles Manson murders to mind. Very eerie echo.
So the investigators, the Army's CID, they must have picked up on that connection immediately. Were they suspicious from the start?
They were very skeptical. For one thing, that living room where he claimed this violent fight happened, it was surprisingly neat, tidy even.
Not what you'd expect after a life or death struggle.
Not at all. And then neighbors reported hearing Colette shouting angrily earlier that night, not, sounds of a home invasion struggle.
Huh. And the prosecution later suggested he actually staged it.
They did. They pointed to an Esquire magazine article about the Manson case found in the MacDonald home. Detailed article. They floated the idea. It was basically a script for his story.
Wow, a script. That's a bold claim.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond the tidy room, was there physical evidence that contradicted his story?
Oh, absolutely. Key stuff. The murder weapons. Found outside the house. Wiped clean.
Wiped clean. Okay.
Yeah. And a piece of surgical glove, the tip, was found near Colette. It matched the type MacDonald used.
Okay, that's significant.
But maybe the most critical thing? Those fibers from his torn blue pajama top.
Right, the top, he said, ripped in the living room fight.
Exactly. Fibers were found scattered all through the bedrooms where the killings actually happened, under little Kristen's fingernail even.
But not in the living room.
Not a single fiber found in the living room, which strongly suggests, the top was torn during the murders in the bedrooms, not in some earlier fight.
That's incredibly damning evidence. But I also heard the crime scene itself was a mess.
A total mess.
Yeah.
Catastrophically compromised is a term often used.
How so?
Well, it wasn't secured properly. People were just trampling through. Evidence got lost like a skin fragment under Colette's nail. MacDonald's pajama bottoms, gone.
So evidence potentially lost forever.
Or contaminated. It became a huge part of MacDonald's defense later on. They called it a wilderness of error, arguing the truth was basically lost in the chaos of that initial investigation.
Which highlights just how vital proper procedure is at a crime scene.
Absolutely critical.
So despite the weird story and the fiber evidence, the Army initially dropped the charges.
They did, after what's called an Article 32 hearing, sort of like a preliminary hearing. Charges dismissed.
But that wasn't the end of it. Colette's stepfather, Freddie Kassab, he didn't let it go.
No, he didn't. He was initially supportive of MacDonald, but then inconsistencies in MacDonald's story started bothering him. Grief turned into suspicion, then into this relentless crusade.
A crusade? What did he do?
He pushed and pushed. Wrote letters, talked to investigators, pressured authorities. His persistence eventually forced the case before a federal grand jury years later.
And they indicted MacDonald.
They did. It really shows the power one determined person can have in the justice system, doesn't it?
It really does. So fast forward to the 1979 trial. The prosecution had built a strong case by then.
Very strong. And they had that dramatic moment with the pajama top again.
What did they do?
An FBI analyst actually put the pajama top on. Then he showed how the 48 ice pick holes in the garment lined up perfectly with Colette's 21 stab wounds.
Wait, 48 holes for 21 wounds. How?
The implication was brutal. MacDonald folded the pajama top and stabbed through it into Colette after she was already dead or dying, as if using it to perhaps shield himself.
That's horrifying. And the blood evidence
Also didn't match his intruder story. But the defense fought back hard, focusing on that contaminated crime scene, arguing none of the evidence could be trusted.
Did they try to point the finger elsewhere? That woman in the floppy hat?
Yes, they tried to implicate Helena Stokely, a local woman known for drug use, who sometimes wore a floppy hat and vaguely resembled MacDonald's description. She'd given some confusing, shifting confessions over the years.
Wait!
But her testimony was ultimately deemed unreliable by the judge, largely due to her drug issues and inconsistencies. She wasn't seen as a credible witness.
So MacDonald was convicted. And then came the books, right? Polarizing books.
Hugely influential. First, Joe McGinnis's Fatal Vision came out relatively soon after the trial.
And that one painted him as guilty.
Absolutely. Cemented that narrative for millions of people. Became a massive bestseller, a miniseries. It really defined the public perception of MacDonald for decades.
But then years later, another perspective emerged.
Right. Errol Morris, the documentary filmmaker, wrote A Wilderness of Error. And he just meticulously picked apart the prosecution's case, highlighted the inconsistencies, the lost evidence, the potential problems.
So he basically argued for reasonable doubt.
Exactly. He fueled the doubt, challenged the Fatal Vision narrative head on. It shows you how powerful these narratives, books, films can be in shaping how we see a case.
And even DNA testing, much later, that didn't settle it either.
Kind of a double-edged sword, really.
Yeah.
Testing found MacDonald's hair clutched in Colette's hand.
Which seems bad for him.
It does. But they also found unidentified hairs, one under Kristen's fingernail, another on her bedspread, hairs that didn't match MacDonald or the family.
So fuel for both sides.
Precisely. The defense points to unknown DNA as proof of intruders. The prosecution says maybe it's contamination from that messy crime scene. It just kept the debate alive.
And Jeffrey MacDonald today, still in prison.
Still in prison. He's exhausted all his appeals. Famously, he's been eligible for parole, but refuses to apply if it requires admitting guilt.
Which he maintains he won't do.
He will not. So, after all this, what should you, the listener, take away? Well, the case for guilt. It's strong. You have the physical evidence, the fibers, the glove tip, the way the pajama top lined up with the wounds. The prosecution built a compelling story.
Yeah, it's hard to ignore that physical evidence.
Yeah.
That doubt lingers, doesn't it? The case for reasonable doubt is also persistent. That botched initial investigation, the lost evidence, the contamination, and always that question, could someone else, like Stokely or others, have been involved?
It really makes this deep dive about more than just a murder case. It's a story about truth itself, how hard it can be to find. It's about how fallible our justice system can be. And maybe most powerfully, how a narrative, whether it's the prosecutions, the defenses, or best-selling authors, can shape a person's entire legacy.
So the question we leave you with is profound. Was justice truly served for Colette, Kimberly, and Kristen? Or did those early failures, that wilderness of error, lead to one of the biggest, most debated potential miscarriages of justice in American history? That's something to think about.